Welcome to I Hate It Here, the podcast for HR and people professionals, making the hardest job in the world just a little bit easier. I'm Hiba Youssef.
Economic anxiety is also part of your future outlook. And, you often hear people say, oh, will my kids have a better life than I have, right? That is future outlook. And job prospects are part of your future outlook. And so I do think it probably has a disproportionate impact, and it is being underestimated when we talk about stress in the workplace. But it is without a doubt driving burnout, disengagement, disenfranchisement, system rejection, like all of it.
If you've ever screamed at your ATS, you're not alone. Team Taylor gets it, built for recruiters who care about great candidate experiences and their own peace of mind. Beautiful career sites, automation that actually works, and UX that doesn't make you want to throw your laptop. This is what hiring looks like when you're ahead of the curve. Welcome back to another episode of the I Hate It Here podcast. I am Hiba, your host and resident hater. And this season on the podcast, we're talking about everything that impacts how you show up at work. And sometimes we like to pretend that work happens in a vacuum, but we all know it doesn't. And there are things like politics, policy, culture, the economy, identity, that all bleeds into how we show up every day. So I want to talk about a few topical things, maybe like what's happening in the world right now and how it's actually shaping work in real time. So today you're getting 3 topical and relevant topics: immigration, economic conditions, and global conflicts. And joining me today for what I'm sure will be probably my favorite episode this season is Dave Garcia. You may recognize Dave because he's been on the podcast before. Dave Garcia is a builder, operator, and speaker who helps leaders turn strategy into winning outcomes. With nearly 20 years of experience across enterprises, consultancies, and startups, his through line is simple: to make work better, you have to make working work. Dave is the co-founder of Veep, a managed marketplace that connects companies with elite independent operating partners. Born from the belief that traditional employment models no longer serve either the business or top-tier talent, Veep's mission is to drive true business impact by empowering world-class independent talent. Its partners have delivered billions in savings, multiple exits, and product used by tens of millions. Dave, welcome to the pod again.
Thanks for having me back.
Should I tell the story about our unreleased episode? No, because I think people will then be like, release it. One time, Dave and I recorded an episode that we decided should never be released in the wild. So we've been atoning for our sins of recording that episode by trying to deliver even better content to you all with this episode. Are you ready?
Hopefully this one makes it to air.
This one will make it to air. I really this was something that kind of out of my mind. I'm talking about a lot of different things this season around how we all show up at work and how it impacts our identities, from just motherhood to I have a few upcoming episodes that are going to talk about a lot of different things that impact how we show up. And I couldn't record this season without talking about like the world and what's happening. And Dave, you and I talk about what's happening in the world probably too often. Like maybe we should have like more fun conversations. Today will be fun. I picked 3 subtopics that I think are very topical and very relevant to the world, HR, and us, and how we show up at work. And I want to start with subtopic 1, which is immigration, identity, and belonging. And we have heard a lot about immigration in the news, how it's shown up, policies, what's happening in different cities. And I really want to dig into that topic first. Like, we've seen immigration resurface as this political topic. What ripple effect do you think that actually has inside workplaces?
A lot. So first, let me applaud you for tackling this subject matter. I think it would be disingenuous for a podcast about people not to address these subjects. So when I look at the current policy posture and what's happening, broadly, I think it's both populist and protectionist in tone while being functionally anti-capitalist. So it is somewhat at odds with our American identity and the story that we've told ourselves over generations. And I think it's meeting the public mood, but not necessarily the market reality. And businesses respond to incentives. So if the cost, compliance, or risk profile of hiring someone in the US rises relative to offshoring, automation, AI, what do you think the firm is going to do? They are not going to hire if it puts them at risk. And so I don't think that's an immoral stance for the business. I think it's somewhat predictable. I think it is aligned to their incentives. And so assuming that all of these companies are going to fire their immigrant talent, reshore manufacturing plants and warehouses into the United States and do the patriotic thing while their incentives point in a completely different direction, I think is somewhat naive. From an employee standpoint, I think it manifests in a few different ways. One is there's effectively a silence tax for folks that are on visas or folks that are first generation immigrants. They self-center. They may be less willing to participate in business travel. They will effectively keep their heads down. And I think you will see that manifest over time in decreased innovation and decreased employee retention, because effectively their paths to growth are limited, and they're limited because they can't fully express themselves and express their expression of the impact they can have on the business is stifled by their immigration status. Secondarily, and we don't talk about this a lot at work, and we should probably talk more about it, is the proliferation of stereotypes as it relates to different business functions, roles, and depth of expertise. What do I mean by that? Finance bros. My HR team is all women. The IT department is Indian, right? We don't talk about this, but these stereotypes proliferate throughout different organizations and throughout different companies as people move around. And I don't think it is valuable to have entire business functions get racially or ethnically coded. And so that kind of that kind of attitude, that kind of representation ends up corroding collaboration. It blocks mobility. It makes people feel like they are othered. And then lastly, the way that it ripples throughout the workplace is ultimately this is going to be a true drain on talent. Whether you're talking from a nationalist perspective and less people will immigrate to this country, or your options will be depleted as an organization, there's just a drain on talent. 1 in 5 U.S. workers is an immigrant. So you can't run a meaningful talent strategy that pretends immigrants do not exist and immigration is not having an effect on your workforce.
Yeah, all plus one to all that. And then as you were talking about talent strategy, I was thinking like, I think the companies that are going to emerge winners in the future are going to be the ones who already like globalized their talent force, essentially like decided to hire without borders. Because I think we're watching this like return to office push so hard. And I'm also just like, that's going to impact your talent strategy. Like, yes, there is certain talent that only exists in big metropolitan cities. But I think when we start to narrow our mind around where our talent is, we actually like miss out on all the benefits we get from having a worldly and like diverse workforce.
It's already happening. So offshoring,
Yeah.
whether it's partners or direct hires, has been happening, will continue to happen. And there's nothing that, there's no policy that can be put in place by a government that will stop that without completely destroying business. So what you do see and what you've seen in the last 8 months is investment going overseas by American companies to build out their offshore sites.
Yeah,
whether it's in their offshore hubs, whether it's in Europe, Asia, Southeast Asia, they're building out their international hubs. And so offshoring is certainly a huge aspect to this. And the automation / AI angle that I do think is somewhat overstated, but will play out within the next 10 to 20 years is also an avenue where people will pursue cost saving, staff augmentation, workflow optimization. The the conversation I have with founders and CEOs is that AI is an infinite amount of team members. And so if you could have an infinite amount of team members working uh, in an infinite way, right? Because coordination, collaboration between different agents and bots is infinite, right? It can just go on.
Yeah.
Then what does that mean for your business? So these things are going to emerge over time. Offshoring is just one aspect of it. But firms will do what is in their best interest. Period.
Yeah. And so like we're all watching this happen. I mean, you cannot turn on the news without reading a headline about what's happening with immigration internally in our country, and then maybe reading more reports that you and I read about how this impacts our talent strategy and everything. I want to talk about the employee angle for a second. Like, how do you think global crisis and this like displacement of people is shaping how employees think about stability, loyalty, belonging? Can they even have any of that?
At the end of the day, we're all people. And what you're talking about is uncertainty. And in times of uncertainty, people crave predictability. And the thing that I always talk to founders and CEOs about when we talk about company culture is that you have the company that you've created
Mm.
and or want. Your company and your company culture doesn't happen to you. If you're the founder, if you're the CEO, you can affect culture in a way that is immeasurable. And so as you develop and put together who you are, why you exist, the reasons behind this collective mission we're all trying to achieve, your employees want to know where you stand. And it's your responsibility to choose a stance and live with it. And I'll give you a couple of examples that are on different sides of the continuum. A couple of years ago, both Coinbase and Basecamp went politics free at work. And they saw a meaningful, but not material portion of their staff self select out.
Yep. I remember that day when the announcement got leaked. It was like all the gossip and the HR texts.
Yep. Alternatively, REI, Ben and Jerry's, and Patagonia all have very prolific public expressions of values. You know what kind of company you're working for when you sign up to work at Ben and Jerry's, Patagonia, or REI. Now, regardless of which position you are aligned with or you feel reflects your personal values is irrelevant. There are different models and they're both extremely coherent. What fails is when businesses pretend that they have neutrality when in fact they're acting selectively. And it's a level of performative behavior that employees hate. And so to me, it's about standing on business. Are you doing the things that you said you're going to do? And if it is a politics free workplace, if it is, we're going to state our values and express our values. As long as you're standing on what you said you would do, your employees will respond accordingly. And from there, you can build a foundation for loyalty and belonging. And it's not my place to tell you which company is best for you, which system best aligns to your individual preferences. But once you have that foundation and you know what the foundation is, loyalty and belonging grow from there. Belonging is intensely local. It's about your manager, it's about your team, and that desire for predictability in your relationships is really where belonging emerges. The company having rules, the company providing things like practical help if you were to be impacted, that's one thing. But the relationship that you have with your manager and your team members is really where your belonging is cultivated. And then loyalty flows from credibility. And that's the standing on business aspect. If you do what you say you're going to do, people will respond in kind and they will be loyal. That's how I think about it. And I do believe it is the responsibility of every leader to establish this kind of foundation, whether it is on one end of the continuum or the other.
Yeah, it's so interesting you bring up the no politics at work, because I remember that day and it was like hotly, like I said, it was the goss in the HR group, but it was like actually really interestingly contested. So like a lot of HR people have different stances on this. And I think for me, I was like, I really struggle with the no politics at work thing because like inherently everything is political.
Hmm.
And it's been really interesting navigating different workplaces in the last 5 years, because like we really saw the rise of like Black Lives Matter after the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Like we saw an uptick of discussions about politics at work. We saw some companies that said don't protest wearing any of our gear, whatever, etc. Like I worked at a company that if you got arrested at a protest, we would have found a way to help you get the support you needed to get out of jail. So it's been interesting just navigating the last 5 years, especially as politics have become deeply divisive as well. Watching companies be like, oh, but we don't talk about politics. And then there's this murmur of like a subculture of like, but wait a minute, everything is political. But like my very existence is political. So like, how does that work?
I do agree with you. I think it's a relatively new phenomenon. Um, I remember my first job was at a Fortune 100 company, and in the employee handbook, it said, we don't talk about politics, religion, or sex
Yeah.
in the employee
Rock and roll.
handbook. And that was 2006.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so now it is very much part of the corporate lexicon and the dialogue. And, um, who you are is inextricably linked to what you do and how you show up at work. And so I don't know where to fall on the continuum for every company. I know where to fall on the continuum for my company
Yeah.
and the kind of culture that I would like to have. And I do think we need to grant organizations the grace to decide that on their own and let
Yep.
people select into organizations they want to work at,
Agree.
rather than an approach to uniformity that is um, inconsistent, incoherent, and quite frankly disingenuous.
Yeah. It is just such a fascinating time to be HR. I said that for so long. Like the last 5 years have really been something, but the last 5 years in HR have really been just so interesting because there are things that we are dealing with today that I don't think, again, when I started working as well, it was don't talk about like sex, drugs, rock and roll. Like we're not talking about religion. We're not talking about that stuff at work. It's very different now. And watching Gen Z even challenge what we have traditionally accepted from workplaces as like what is the status quo has just made our job like also increasingly more complicated. Like I get questions left and right from HR people like, what do I do if an employee saw on another employee's social media like that they were posting these things that were against how the other employee felt and now the employee feels unsafe? And like, unfortunately, my response is always like, what does it say in your handbook? Because like that is where you can lay the groundwork and make your stance clear as a company. But I think a lot of us are stuck in this tricky gray area where some companies don't want to put that type of stuff in their handbook, but then end up in situations where they are having to deal with complaints about an employee's social media or complaints about who somebody is retweeting on Twitter or even complaints about what someone put in their profile pic. And I'm like, wait a minute, when did this become my job? Like, when did I become the social media person who has to like look at your social media to make sure like you can work here and you haven't violated anything?
The truth is always gray, right? Like we talked about this in the past, that there are
Yeah.
decisions that leaders can make and there's black and white, and as a leader you should never go in the gray. Policy is in effect black and white, but the truth is always somewhere in the gray. And so there are certainly situations where um, your identity, your culture, your gender, your sexual orientation is a factor in how you're being assessed, how you are being communicated to, how you are being engaged with at work. There are also times where your identity, you can weaponize it and use it to your advantage,
Sure
right?
can.
And so the truth is somewhere in the gray. And so policy and what we're talking about from an HR standpoint and from a senior leadership standpoint is the establishment of policy. Policy is black and white. And and so putting in the time, the effort, and the wherewithal to develop, disseminate, and hold accountable to a set of policies is really hard work. And that's why you say, what does your handbook say, right? And if you haven't done the work, that's why you are in the gray. And so you shouldn't be a social media manager. You shouldn't have to you shouldn't have to police, right? And ultimately you end up policing because the ground rules and expectations are not clearly set.
Yeah. But so many people are afraid to do that, setting the clear expectations. And I always default to the clear expectations are what's going to help us in the tricky situations. So we're not making a sliding scale of decisions that are inequitable. Like that is what really grinds my gears in HR, where it's like, well, let's make this decision for this specific situation. And I'm like, no, no, for every specific situation, there's potentially a policy that you could write so that you never have to make a one off decision again. And I feel like sometimes I default to the policy because it's my way of ensuring that there's equity in the long run. And I did an episode on this last season with Stephanie, the CPO from Life Labs, where we talked about policy decisions and how you can actually make them equitable. But it's something I just think about could save people a lot of heartache in this time where it feels like everything is really tense and people are saying a lot of things on the internet. My worst case scenario is that I end up having to police two employees against each other just because one person said something that made the other person uncomfortable. But at the same time, like there are some things that shouldn't be said, honestly. Like there's some language that shouldn't be said and shouldn't be used. And I also have to like pull apart my own values in this all too, David. Like Dave, like people forget that HR people also have our stances, our experiences, our perspective that could potentially even make any situation we're in that much more complicated.
Yes, which is why the policing function is one that I said you should not be responsible for. Look, I think at some level, the leaders who do not invest time in this are miscalculating risk, and they're miscalculating risk because they are not the ones dealing with the issues, right?
Yeah.
Because you are the one policing. HRBP is the one policing. It is happening at a first or second level manager, not at a senior leadership level. And so the time is not necessarily spent in doing this. And then honestly, there is again, there could be you over indexed on policy, right? And you don't leave room for nuance and situational context. That's where decision making frameworks come into play. And we've talked about this in previous pods. People can go back to many of our episodes where we talk about having a value system, having consistent decision making processes, understanding how those values manifest in interactions with employees. All those things are still true so that you can handle those situations that require nuance, context, and sensitivity. But broad-based policy and broad-based frameworks are extremely helpful in establishing fairness, in establishing equity, and in ensuring that there is what I call congruence between the words, actions, behaviors, and outcomes a company is achieving.
Yeah, love that. I fear I have taken us off track. So I have like one last question in my immigration subtopic, and then we'll move on to my other two that I'm sure people are dire for us to get to. What a loaded one. What responsibilities do employers have to create safety for immigrants or first gen employees right now? What a loaded question for me to ask you.
Zero. No.
Sorry.
I guess,
That's really loaded.
we've talked about this in the past too, but
Yeah.
There are four constituencies that you have to take into account when you're making decisions as a leader: shareholders, employees, customers, and then society writ large. We ask that you consider those constituencies as you make investment decisions, as you make expansion decisions, as you make product decisions, whatever it may be. And in every decision, you will lean into one constituency. One constituency will always be favored over the other, right? It's just the way the dynamic works. There's never a decision that equally benefits all constituencies. If there was, work would be a lot easier. Unfortunately, it doesn't. And so my view here is that it is the responsibility of the employer to protect employees to the maximum extent of the law without putting the broader business at existential risk. And risk is not only government action or social media backlash. It can be customer response. It can be market access, operational continuity if half your staff resigns. Your job is to assess, decide, and stand behind whatever the decision is and protect people during this uncertainty. And then ultimately, those people will over deliver when it really counts. But that is my view, right? That having and protecting employees, to the maximum extent lawfully without putting the broader business at risk. So, what does that mean, right? In policy, it could mean status neutrality, where somebody's immigration status is not taken into account as you assess their performance or apply discipline, right? Any form of disciplinary action. Operational care. If you have as part of your travel policy, do you have a playbook of what would happen if one of your employees is stopped, detained at the border or put on a return flight? Because this is happening to folks of all backgrounds at this point. So do you have a playbook? Company provided immigration counsel. Are you providing them pre-clearance before they travel? Are you allowing them for mobility options, whether that's an internal transfer to another worksite hub or the ability to work remotely? Like, these are all policies that you can establish in advance to protect people. And so that is my belief. Again, I think uniformity is a really difficult thing to preach. If you were to establish that initial foundation, whatever your policy positions and your company behavior set should emerge from that. But that's how I would approach it.
Most ATS tools feel clunky, cold, and complicated. Teamtailor makes it feel effortless. Built for modern hiring teams, Teamtailor combines drag-and-drop workflows, branded career sites, and smart automations that save hours without sacrificing the human touch. Because every candidate interaction, yes, even those rejection emails, shape your employer brand. Teamtailor helps you make those moments count. It's why brands like Oatly, Five Guys, and Happy Socks trust Teamtailor to turn hiring into a seamless brand experience that candidates remember for all the right reasons. Hiring should be simple, fun, and effective, and Teamtailor makes it all possible. Yeah, it is. It's really interesting watching how companies have responded in this moment. It's just, I can't, I have to stop saying this because people are probably getting sick of me saying this, but like, this feels like some like history book shit moment, Dave. Like, and God, I gotta stop saying this too. It's a really interesting time to be an HR leader in this world as we're navigating all of this, because we are getting these questions day in and day out. We are like, there aren't many HR podcasts that I have seen where people are talking about immigration. And it's because we have to also think through the lens of we as operators of the company and, you know, responsible for the company. Like, there are certain companies out there that are not going to want to do or say anything and think they have no responsibility. And then we as HR either have to enforce that, and we can't publicly say we're against it. Like, it's just a smattering of all these things happening at once, and everyone is struggling to figure out, like, where do I land in all of this? But I love the way that you broke down like the 4 primary responsibilities we have, and then thinking through, you know, how that all interconnects. I just think like the hard part for me personally is like, I also have my thought on how I feel about all of this. And there are a lot of HR people who might be working at places like Coinbase, or they've accidentally selected into some place that they didn't want to be a part of this conversation. And they as HR people feel very strongly about it. And so I think like existential crises galore.
I think this is going to dovetail with the conversation around economic anxiety.
Yeah.
It's all interconnected. I will say that your personal morals and values, if you can align them with the company you work at, fantastic. If it's really difficult for you to align them with the company that you work at, you have to consider your options and weigh your alternatives. You can stay and compartmentalize. You can choose to pursue other options. This is up to you. I will say that is draining. It's also a manifestation of the silence tax that we discussed earlier, right? It's not just a silence tax on those directly impacted. It is a silence tax on those that have to represent the company in internal and external communications. So that's why coherence and coherence around policy and being and a level of congruence in the company's behaviors, actions, and outcomes is very critical, because then it becomes easier to represent the company in internal, external discussions.
Yeah. But my God, when it's the gray area though, good luck. It's really tough.
Yeah.
And there are probably people listening to this right now who are in that weird gray area. Like, do you have any advice for them on how they figure out how to get their company to be more transparent about where it is they land on all this?
If your company has forums that where they seek input bottoms up, I would use those as forums to express myself, or express yourself. There's a kind of a business OS thing called constructive dissent, where you can provide feedback and opportunity, like point out opportunities, but then align around whatever the decision is that the company makes. Right. So I would have that posture when approaching these topics and subject matter. When we talk about psychological safety, it is only a safe environment if you can express these things and then not fear reprisal. And so, if you do not have the psychological safety to do so, then unfortunately, this is a situation where I would say you either compartmentalize or you get out. But if you do have the psychological safety to broach this subject matter, your leaders want to hear from you. They want to know what's happening on the ground. I've never met a leader that enjoys their ignorance. They do want to
Yeah.
understand what's happening. They do care. They're just somewhat disconnected from the on the ground reality. So I do think if your company already has a level and depth of psychological safety where you can bring this up, by all means, use the forums that are available to you to raise the flags. If you don't have the psychological safety, unfortunately, you have to consider other alternatives.
Yeah. I will leave it at that because I feel like we could do a whole episode on this another day. But I want to pivot to like my next topical subject, which is economic anxiety, inequity, and this new definition of enough. And I mean, economic uncertainty definitely affects motivation, engagement, mental health for everyone. And so I want to start there because it is a very interesting time. And I won't make the joke I usually make where I say, like, I had to Google the economy this week because I read enough news articles about the economy now to now realize I don't have to Google it because it's all everyone will talk about. So we have seen so many reports with like inflation still squeezing, housing costs rising. How are these financial pressures showing up at work?
So I will say this was a big part of our band episode.
Yeah,
We talked
our
about
band,
our band episode. We talked about this a lot.
the unreleased
Yes,
episode. Okay.
let's call it the unreleased episode. We talked about this at length, and so I think just foundationally, like this audience is a knowledge worker audience. Let's just all kind of align around that. It's the context with which we will have this discussion. If you lead or manage frontline employees, we'll touch on that briefly, but this is primarily focused on knowledge workers. So I say that to say we have jobs and careers, not professions. Being a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, an accountant, that's a profession. It is a skill that you can hone and craft and you can do independently if need be. And professions have provided a level of stability and economic certainty throughout the development of the United States and other developed countries for centuries. You're an HR person. By all accounts, people would call me a strategist or a marketer or an ops person, some mixture of those three things. That's not a profession. And it's funny, like when you go back to the McKinseys of the world, in their incorporation, the big four management consultancies, one of their goals was to turn consulting into a profession. I don't think that's happened, but it is evident that you're in a different position if you have a job or career versus a profession. So I'll say that first. Second, like Stephen Colbert coined this thing called truthiness. Like, I don't know it to be true, but it just feels true. So I'm going to give you something that I feel is truthy. Okay. And that is everybody has a second job. Everybody who's a knowledge worker has a second job, whether or not they admit it or not. You might be day trading. I'm on this subreddit called Overemployed, where people have J1, J2, and J3. You may be doing DoorDash deliveries on the weekend. Yeah. I don't know. But when I hear the employment numbers, when the employment figures like record low unemployment, my mind goes to that's because everybody has two jobs because everything is so expensive at this point, and it is manifesting in many, many, many different ways. So that's all vibes, right? I'll get to
Love the
actual
vibes. It's
business
vibes
insight.
based research. Okay. That's
Yeah,
basically what they're,
it's all vibes.
yeah.
But I do feel like we're in this place where people are rethinking time spent. People are rethinking the value exchange between the 8 to 10 hours that I spend at my employer compared to what I could be doing on my own or at another company,
Yeah.
or what I could be doing in the the 4 to 6 hours of free time, and that's when you get job 2 and job 3 and job 4. So um, now, when you talk about it functionally and kind of more academically, uh, this kind of anxiety leads to what I'll call focus drift and hidden downtime. So financial stress often shows up as distraction. It and that in work manifests as mistakes and errors and poor work product. You end up spending time, like mental energy during your day on your financial state and your financial situation rather than the work at hand. And I would say it's not uncommon to walk around the office in today's day and age, if you go to the office and see someone with their Robinhood account up. Like that is not uncommon.
Maybe.
It's not. And so I think it's something like 80% of employees will say that pay has not kept up with the cost of living.
Yeah, because it hasn't.
And and that's not vibes, right? That's not feelings. That is cost of living has materially increased. And so what I'm seeing, and especially I talk to what folks would consider top performers often. What I'm seeing is top performers leave for better opportunities, whether that's independent opportunities or opportunities at other companies with higher compensation and potentially more flexibility, while middle and lower performers stay because they're concerned about securing their next job. And that's not workplace retention. That's not loyalty. It's self-preservation. And this is all interconnected with trust in institutions being low, and effectively belief in the system is decreasing. And capitalism only works if everyone gets their piece. And it's this idea that's been in my head. I should write a thesis on it. All my life, I've heard that the middle of this country is fiscally conservative and socially liberal. Like all my life, I've heard like that's the middle of this country. I actually think the middle of this country is socially libertarian and fiscally self-interested. And when you when your self-interests are at risk, you do different things. And so I think that's where we are, where there is a reconsideration happening of all of this. And it's why people are doing the things that they're doing politically and why they're doing the things that they're doing economically.
Yeah. And in like the last 5 years, we've seen like engagement drop substantially. And like, while I could probably do a whole episode on if measuring engagement is even the right thing to measure, I'm wondering sometimes, like, are we underestimating this economic anxiety that could be potentially driving burnout or forcing people to go seek multiple employment elsewhere as disengagement? Like, do you think maybe people aren't actually disengaged? They're just like strapped?
100%. I think on our very first episode, we talked about daily stress, right?
Yeah,
But
we did.
I'm going to try to remember this off the top of my head. It's probably 2-year-old data. But it was something like 50% of people experienced stress for most of the workday yesterday. And so if you're a leader, if you're in HR and you're thinking about everything that we're trying to accomplish as an organization, as humans working with other humans, everyone you're talking, like half of everyone you're talking to is in a persistent state of stress. And so is that stress economic? I am sure that a disproportionate amount of it is economic,
Yeah.
because economic anxiety is also part of your future outlook. And you often hear people say, "Oh, will my kids have a better life than I have?" Right? That is future outlook, and job prospects are part of your future outlook. And so I do think it probably has a disproportionate impact, and it is being underestimated when we talk about stress in the workplace. But it is without a doubt driving burnout, disengagement, disenfranchisement, system rejection, like all of it.
Yeah. I've been thinking about that so much recently. Like, one, I have my own gripes with measuring engagement as a whole, but then I've just been like, how could anyone be engaged in these times? Like, I'm like, I open the news and there's like six scary headlines that I'm like, all six of those are terrifying to me. And I'm spending time thinking about like how AI could potentially change our society, while then also like reading all the stats on how it's not proving to actually make people more effective at work. Like, no one can get a clear sense of what's going to happen with AI. Not saying that we all need to know what's going to happen in the future, but I mean the economic piece of it. It is hard for me to read all the stats I read and not think like disengagement is in part to the fact that people feel like they are being squeezed every day and living, not being able to live life because everything has gotten increasingly more expensive. And then their
Have,
pay is not going
have,
up too.
Have you seen those person on the street interviews where they say to the person, "How much does the other person need to make for you to be their boyfriend or girlfriend or go on a date with them?" I don't
No,
really.
but I need to go watch
Oh, yeah,
those
yeah.
clearly.
Get on TikTok. It's like person on the street interviews in whatever Bourbon Street in New Orleans, and people will throw out numbers that are wild. Oh, my husband or my wife, my spouse needs to make $500,000 a year, $200,000 a year. Or you're a new college graduate. How much do you expect to get paid at your first job? $150,000 a year. They throw out these wild numbers, and again, these are like mostly young people, but their context around how much things cost is completely different than our context on how much you should be paid for a job. Right?
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
completely askew. And they also have the social pressure of growing up on Instagram and seeing vacations and cars and lifestyle. But there is a wildly divergent experience that young people are having, and people are having as they think about the money that they make and the money they have to spend
Yeah.
compared to the money that, as an employer, the money we would like to pay them is just
Yeah.
wildly divergent.
It is. That's like one of the hardest things about HR is when you get a 24-year-old who comes in, and I shouldn't even say their age, but you get someone who's newer in their career and they say to you like, "Oh, I should be making $150,000." And you're thinking to yourself, "In what reality would I pay you $150,000 for early career work?" But like it is, and it's wild sometimes because I find myself being like, at my first job, I made like 40K. And I just remember being like, they just graduated college. Like I was like job hunting for months after college. But you also forget millennials went through the worst recessions we've ever seen and came out the other side trying to, I don't know, still get jobs. But it's really interesting watching that perspective change as I think about like some days there's a Drake lyric. I hate to quote Drake, but I have to quote. Sorry, Dave's laughing at me right now. I'm way too young to be feeling this old, and I think about that like all the time when people come to me with these very interesting compensation asks because I'm like, in my day, I would have never. And I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, what is happening? But then you think about the frame of mind. You're right. Like, I grew up in a time largely where most of my childhood, there was no internet, or they were like starting to build it. And then I finally got access to it as an adult. But like, I could not imagine how different my lens and perspective would be on life and compensation if I had spent my entire life watching people on the internet achieve those things at like similar ages to mine or with similar families like mine. Yeah, my perspective would probably be very skewed as well.
I would say that you are an expert at expressing empathy,
Mm,
whereas other folks who have had similar experiences may use that reference as a gatekeeping tool, right? And so this is where the divergence happens.
Yeah.
It happens in this kind of um, this is the way that it's always been done. This is how
I
we do
hate
things
that.
here. This is how
Ugh.
we do things here. Back in my day, we did X, Y, and Z. And so you as a practitioner of empathy can have that perspective, but also understand the plight of the 24-year-old that we're not going
Yes.
to mention
The 24-hour.
at the same time. And so not everyone has that level of maturity.
Yeah, you also have to explain to them like compensation is so wildly misunderstood. And also like people sometimes think like, "Oh, but HR doesn't want to give me that pay raise." And I'm like, "Listen, if I could give all of you a pay raise, I would. I would snap my magic wand and all of you would be paid whatever you want to be paid like and you would be so happy and you would come to work and the company would still somehow make profit and revenue." Unfortunately, that is not the world I exist in. Like there
I'd give
are
myself a raise. I'd give myself a raise too.
I'm like, that's not how compensation works, but it's like so misunderstood. And so it's also our job in those like moments to explain that to the employees, but also I'm explaining it to them with that frame of mind of like everything in the world is so expensive. Employee salaries have not grown in the same way that has not kept up with inflation, not that it should, but I'm still trying to explain it in a way that does, you're right, balance the empathy with here's how we actually come up with your pay. Like it's not just a I wave a wand and you get whatever you want. It's like, no, there's like math and science that goes into this. But
Yeah, there's a practical aspect of it that cannot be ignored. But to your point, there's also the empathy you have for the person making the request.
yeah, 100% when they're like, I can't pay my bills. I'm like, I can't do anything about that, but I'm going to try to do my best to make sure that you're paid as fairly as you are at this organization. It's tough. I think like,
Yeah,
and I
I
get it.
think so. What is HR's role, right?
Yeah.
And what is a people leader's role? My view is your role is to solve the equitable compensation problem,
Yep.
not the responsible spending problem.
Yep.
So my job is to ensure that you are paid equitably for the work that you do at this organization as it relates to your peers and your industry and your industry counterparts.
Yep.
That is my role. It is not my role to ensure that you have a spending account on the other side that is within that budget.
Yeah.
So
I do think there are a lot of financial benefits that employers can offer to their employees where they get access to things like a financial coach who could help them with said thing. I think like if your company has the budget and can invest in financial well-being benefits, that is one place I would urge people to go look at the benefits space because there could be a lot of things for a very low cost to the employer that you could offer to the employee to help put them in a better position financially. Like that.
yes, and there are things that you can do as an employer that reduce the economic burden of working at your company.
Yeah.
For example, adopting remote work, right? So we talk about
Oh, yeah.
return to office extensively. Remote work enables you to remove the economic burden of living of locality, right? Because there could be a burden associated with locality for your $65,000 a year content manager, right? Like
Yeah.
so there are things that you can do in addition to providing third-party external resources. You can develop policy and ways of working that reduce the economic burden.
Okay. Now, time for our last and final rapid subtopic 3. We're talking global conflict, climate, and collective exhaustion, which is so tough. I did a whole episode on this earlier last season with, oh my God, why can I not remember who I did this episode with? I did an episode on climate change last season, and wow, my brain is really tapping out today. So I don't want to touch on this for too long, but I do have like 2 questions I have to ask you. How do world events, from wars to protests to climate disaster, actually change how people show up at work?
I go back to what I said earlier, people are people. So in effect, you have less bandwidth, less emotional capacity, and quite frankly, a shorted fuse.
Mm,
So you're quicker to respond than you normally would be if you're being affected, right?
yeah.
There are countless uh, social and economic and international events that I can reference in the last 5 to 10 years
Yep.
that have changed how I showed up that working day. And so, one, it is the individual's responsibility to try to best contain however you're feeling. And if you are feeling like you cannot be a good workplace citizen that day, you should say something. You should ask for a mental health day. You should ask for time off. You should ask and express how you are feeling so that your manager is aware. Maybe you don't go into any meetings that day, right? You take less meetings that day. You don't do any one-on-ones that day, but you figure out a way to manage yourself when you're feeling this way. Because you do not want your emotional state to reflect poorly on your work product, on your relationships, and on your organization. And so it is okay that you feel that way. It is 1,000% okay that you feel that way. The first responsibility is for you. The second responsibility is for your company. And so this goes back to, where do we stand? And if we do stand in a place, in a position where this is, we would like to address these topics at work, because there are certainly workplaces that say we do not want to address these topics.
Yeah, talk about that.
Your responsibility as an employer is really to name, not narrate. Acknowledge the events, talk through what it means and how we treat each other here at this company based on our values. Talk about why you have psychological safety in this workplace environment. You should not be making broad-based mandates. You should not be
commentary on political situations,
issuing declarations, right?
Nope.
We see that things are extremely challenging right now. Here's what we're doing.
Yep.
Here's what we expect of you. If you need a mental health break, if you need X, Y, and Z, you are based in, I don't want to put your government out there, but you are based broadly in the Mid-Atlantic region.
Sure am.
There are a lot of things happening, whether it is the presence of the National Guard, the government shutdown, that are affecting employees in the Mid-Atlantic region. You cannot pretend that those things do not exist. But you are also not being asked to narrate or to provide your individual point of view on those situations. So it is a very fine line. Again, name, not narrate. Acknowledge, express empathy, talk about what it means in your workplace and how we treat each other and what our values are. In that expression of empathy, again, having policies that allow for people to take the space that they need to resolve how they're feeling, I think is a great policy. And that's how you can create a level of psychological safety as these situations and global crises continue to emerge.
Yeah. And if you're interested in more on how the world outside is impacting HR, last season my episode was with Aparna Raw. Definitely remembered it. I needed the caffeine to hit. I think that's like a brilliant place to honestly end the episode. Like, we've touched on so many things throughout these 3 subtopics, from immigration, economic uncertainty to global conflict, that I think they're all really intertwined too. And I think your baseline advice through all of it was super strong. Like, what is your company's stance? Like, remembering what it is that you have committed to as an organization. And then within that, exactly what you said, it is not our job as HR to explain complex geopolitical conflicts as much as I can, because I have a degree in it. I'm not going to. My job is to make the employees feel like they are safe and comfortable, regardless of how they feel about said geopolitical conflict. And I think, it's a lot to remember that as HR, and also holding space for yourself. The way that I deal with it is like, my employee base is my employee base. My friend group is my friend group. When I want to have like tough conversations about what is happening in the world and how I feel about it, I go to my friends who have known me for 15 plus years and I have those conversations with them, or my best friend, or with people like Dave. I have to remind myself that the appropriate place for me to have those conversations sometimes is not actually with my coworkers. And that is because like I represent the company. And to a certain extent, if the company has a stance where they don't want to talk about said things, I don't think it is my job as an HR person to then go and try to educate people on all the things happening in the world and why they should care and know about it. I don't, maybe that's like a hot take, but that's how I deal with it. It's like the duality of HR people is internally, I'm a person. Externally to my friends, I'm a different person who can have strong opinions about anything I want to have them on.
I think at some level we're all like that. And if you're not, maybe you should think about it in the context of work. Yeah, I completely agree.
If you're really lucky, you could have this conversation with your executive team, but I will just tell you, like, that is few and far between unless you work for a mission-driven organization where that is their mission. It can be really hard to have conversations about these things in the world with your leadership team.
If you're going to do it, the way to do it is to anchor it in those constituencies.
Yeah.
Customers, shareholders, society, and employees.
Excellent.
That is the way to have the discussion and how it affects those constituencies.
Dave, this was killer. You'll be back. I feel like we should do a game show format next time, or like we're always talking about like really serious things. I'm like, no, when do we get to talk about like pop culture and play games? So maybe for your next episode, we'll do that. But for people who are looking to get in touch with you, learn more from you, work with you, where's the best place they can reach you?
NYCDDG on all social channels. And you can find us at www.veep.work.
So that's I love Veep, well, the show and also what you're building. So thank you so much. I'm so grateful for you. Next time we're going to have games, I think is really what I'm going to manifest it for us.
I'm ready.
I can't wait. I'll see you soon.
Thanks for tuning in. Keep up with all the latest HR resources by subscribing on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you listen. And if you love I Hate It Here, tell an HR friend. I'll see you next time.